I'm Iana Esters. I'm the Whistleblower Protection Coordinator for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I'm also a supervisor in the Office of Inspector General, Office of Counsel to the Inspector General. Basically, that means that I understand the challenges you face as a grant or contract recipient when trying to determine what to do to report wrongdoing with anything related to a grant or contract, or experience retaliation as a result of making such a report or filing a complaint. So, we're producing this video to help you understand your rights and responsibilities for reporting wrongdoing related to an NIH grant or contract, and what to do if you experience retaliation. We'll cover the following topics. We'll define what a whistleblower is, what a protected disclosure looks like, what contractors or grant recipients are required to report under HHS regulations, what whistleblower retaliation looks like, the role of the Office of Inspector General when it comes to whistleblower protection and retaliation, and the NIH's role in addressing protected disclosures and allegations of retaliation. Along the way, we'll chat with a few of my colleagues who will help provide technical expertise and insight about the whistleblowing process. We'll also hear personal stories from those who have gone through the whistleblowing process. Okay, we've got a lot to cover. But first, if you haven't already done so, I highly recommend that you watch our Whistleblower 101 training video before viewing this video. In that video, we cover the fundamentals of whistleblower disclosures and walk you through the steps involved in making a disclosure. We also explain what the HHS-OIG does after receiving a disclosure. Whistleblower 101 will provide you with foundational knowledge to aid your understanding of these issues as they relate to NIH contractors and grant recipients. If you think you need to watch that, don't worry, I'll be waiting for you when we're finished. I've got all the time in the world. But seriously, as the HHS Whistleblower Protection Coordinator, my goal is to empower the HHS community with the protections they need to report wrongdoing without fearing the consequences. It's also critical that we ensure employers are aware that there are consequences for taking retaliatory acts against our most precious asset, HHS employees and employees of HHS contractors and grantees. So let's start with the basics. Okay, at its most basic level, a protected disclosure is a report of wrongdoing, a complaint of fraud, waste, or abuse, unlawful activity, or a danger to public health or safety. To provide a little more clarity about what that means, I spoke with my fellow attorney, Elizabeth Tyson.
Thanks, Iana. Okay. So protected disclosures are information that the employee reasonably believes is evidence of gross mismanagement of a federal contract or grant, a gross waste of federal funds, an abuse of authority relating to a federal contract or grant, a substantial and specific danger to public health or safety, or a violation of law, rule, or regulation related to a federal contract or grant, which includes the competition for or negotiation of a contract. For a little more context, let's review some examples of protected disclosure reports with our colleagues at NIH.
I remember there was an accounting clerk who reported to a recipient institution management official that NIH funds were being transferred from one grant to another to cover year-end deficits. I also recall that there was an employee of a grant recipient who reported to NIH that the principal investigator was using grant funds for personal expenses, including vacations and personal vehicles. Another report I was auditing involved a lab associate who reported that NIH funds were used to remodel the principal investigator's office. They reported that to the email you see here, NIH-hotline@nih.gov. There was also an employee of an NIH contractor who reported to management that the contractor was billing NIH for items not used on several projects, Lastly, I recall a contractor who knowingly misrepresented the total labor hours that their staff worked on a federal contract and falsely billed the government for the labor effort that was in excess of what was actually provided by the contractor.
So, as you can see, there are a variety of examples of reports you can make to NIH or OIG as the employee of a federal contractor or grant recipient. Now you should know what a protected disclosure is and also what it may look like in a real-world situation. Now, let's talk a little bit about who a whistleblower is and what that means. Now that we know what is protected, we need to look at who is protected. The person who made the protected disclosure is referred to as a whistleblower. We get it. That name might have negative connotations, but in fact, the opposite is true. Whistleblowers play a critical role in ensuring that we operate within the law. And that's not just my perspective.
Whistleblowers are really the eye-openers for our agency in terms of trying to figure out what is going on in the programs and the departments in which they work.
I look at whistleblowing as like one of the first lines of defense that we have to ensure proper stewardship of grant funds for individuals or institutions that are not doing what's appropriate. You know, without the courage and the initiative of the whistleblower coming to us, a lot of this information would never meet our radar.
Whistleblowing is important because sometimes that is the only way you can hear about issues that are occurring at a research facility that's not NIH. All the work is being done elsewhere. We don't always have eyes on the ground.
As you can see, whistleblowers are so important. This is why whistleblower protection laws protect individuals from receiving an unfavorable employment action when they make a protected disclosure. It's also why HHS contractors and recipients are required to report criminal violations related to an HHS contract or grant, and why employees of contractors and recipients are protected from retaliation under the National Defense Authorization Act of fiscal year 2013. Without the bravery of whistleblowers, it would be extremely difficult for us to protect taxpayer dollars from being squandered by fraud, waste, or abuse. So, as you can see, whistleblowers are critical to everyone's success. Now, let's discuss who you should report a protected disclosure to. One of the first questions you might be asking yourself is, who should I report to? First, it's important to know that the individuals that you can report a protected disclosure to are called protected sources. Generally speaking, a protected disclosure must be made to a protected source in order for whistleblower protection laws to apply. Who can be considered a protected source? Well, I spoke with my colleague Elizabeth to explain.
Yes, this is such an important aspect to understand, Deanna. There are actually a lot of people you can turn to as a protected source. This includes a member of Congress or a representative of a committee of Congress, an inspector general, the Government Accountability Office, a federal employee responsible for contract oversight or management at the relevant agency, an authorized official at the Department of Justice or other law enforcement agency, a court or grand jury, a management official or other employee of the contractor or subcontractor who has the responsibility to investigate, discover, or address misconduct. And as always, there's the tried and true HHS-OIG hotline. Now for HHS grants recipients, it's your turn. Protected disclosures can be made to HHS-OIG, OER, or to report a concern online. The address is listed here. This is a resource page for reporting different forms of misconduct involving NIH grants and who to contact. This includes, but isn't limited to, guidance for reporting grant fraud, research misconduct, and harassment. And there's always the trusted NIH hotline at nih.gov email address. So there's lots of options for you. Just take the step that you're most comfortable with.
Well said, my friend. Just know that there are a lot of options for you to take. And it's okay if you're overwhelmed thinking about the best one. You're not alone.
So when you're considering making a protected disclosure, NIH, we've got a whole landing page of all the different types of allegations, whether it's fraud, waste, or abuse, research misconduct, harassment. We'll get you to the right place. And all we need is some initial information. We can always follow up with you as long as we have a contact. To get additional information, you don't even need to have a whole trove of documents. Anything you can give us, we can use that as a jumping off point. And we collaborate internally. We have plenty of offices with a lot of resources to conduct investigations. So anything you can give us, just making that initial, either picking up the phone, sending us the email, get the ball rolling, and we can take it from there.
So, there's a lot for you to consider. But if you'd like a complete list of the protected sources, you can always refer to the Whistleblower 101 video that we've created for your convenience. Now, let's move on to discuss the type of information you should provide when making a report. Don't worry. To make a report of wrongdoing related to NIH grants or contracts, you do not need extensive details or documentation, but there is some basic information that would aid officials in assessing and investigating the allegation, as my colleague Brooke Hargrave describes.
When you're reporting wrongdoing, you should include information such as the name of the NIH contractor or recipient institution, the name of the alleged wrongdoer, the dates of the incidents, the grant or contract number if you happen to know it, and a basic description of the alleged incident. Attaching supporting documentation is helpful, but it's not mandatory for making an initial report. Oh, and if you're not making the report anonymously, including your contact information is extremely helpful in case the NIH or HHS-OIG official needs to obtain follow-up information.
We want to make sure you know that OIG reviews every complaint that we receive. Now, you may not hear back from us about your complaint, at least after the initial confirmation email. But please understand that we take every notification seriously. We have an entire team dedicated to looking into every claim. So no, claims do not disappear in some government black hole. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So I'm going to have our team walk through how a whistleblower disclosure results in an audit, an investigation, or an evaluation. We'll describe what we do with it and how that results in fraud, waste, and abuse being uncovered.
If you're a contractor's employee and you report your allegation to an NIH employee, the NIH employee shall instruct the complainant to contact the HHS-OIG directly via the hotline. NIH contract staff does not assess, respond to, or investigate these allegations. This falls within the exclusive purview of the HHS-OIG. The HHS-OIG, or NIH DPI, or Division of Program Integrity, will follow up with the appropriate NIH staff if necessary. Further, the NIH contract staff does not divulge any information about their conversation with a complainant or any investigation, not even to their supervisor. Express any opinions, request supporting documentation, or provide advice or guidance other than instructing them to contact the HHS-OIG. Please note, the NIH contract staff does not inform the contractor's organization.
Now, if you're an NIH grant recipient, the protected disclosure could come to me. I'm the director of the NIH Division of Grants Compliance and Oversight. We'll ask the whistleblower a few questions to get a better understanding of the situation. If criminal activity is implicated, we will refer the matter to the NIH Division of Program Integrity, or even the OIG.
The NIH Division of Program Integrity receives both criminal and non-criminal allegations of misuse of grant and contract funds and conflicts of interest. We receive allegations from grant recipients, contractors, concerned citizens, and NIH employees that may be considered protected disclosures. The main source for receiving the allegation is the NIH hotline at nih.gov email address. Okay, so if the allegation is a non-criminal allegation of misuse of grant and contract funds, that falls under our purview. That's when we may conduct a review of the allegations. However, upon review, if we determine that there's a need for a criminal investigation or an allegation of fraud, waste, or abuse, unlawful activity, or a danger to public health or safety, then that falls under the purview of the OIG.
And that's us. If a complaint is filed with the OIG directly, it comes to my team at the hotline in the OIG Office of Investigations. Over at the hotline, we receive that disclosure, process it into our system, and then, if necessary, hand it off to one of our regional or headquarters investigative offices across the country. If your complaint alleges whistleblower retaliation, it goes to the Office of Investigations Special Investigations Branch, and the supervisors in that branch will determine where it goes next.
That will be someone like me. I'm the special agent in charge of the Special Investigations Branch. As a special agent in charge, I review protected disclosures and whistleblower retaliation complaints. We take a look at the evidence or proof that the whistleblower provides, then make a decision as to whether this is an allegation that needs to be further investigated. If it is a retaliation case, you will receive a communication from one of my investigators letting you know the outcome of our decision and the next step. If it is a disclosure of wrongdoing, like fraud, waste, or abuse, it may not always be appropriate for an investigation. However, there may be other parts of the OIG that may be interested in your complaint, like our Office of Audit Services. If so,
it comes to me. I'm a senior auditor with the Office of Audit Services. We examine protected disclosures by reviewing the material a whistleblower provides to determine if it can assist us in our audit work, particularly if it could help us understand the operations and procedures of an HHS program that we are auditing. We may also look for additional evidence that may support the whistleblower's claims, and may even interview the whistleblower to gain additional context for our audit work. The whistleblower's disclosures can be critical to uncovering compliance issues that we may find in HHS operations, as it was when we worked on the NHLBI Other Transactions audit that resulted from a whistleblower complaint. As a result of that complaint, we found significant concerns with the agency's use of other transaction authority, documentation of these transactions, and that the agency used ineffective internal controls to comply with federal funding requirements. The whistleblower's disclosure was critical in helping us unmask these concerns.
Thanks, everyone. All right, that was a lot. So let's just do a quick recap. Contractor employees report allegations to NIH employees. They'll instruct the complainant to contact the HHS-OIG directly through the hotline. NIH grant recipients submit protected disclosures to the NIH Office of Extramural Research, Grants Compliance and Oversight. If criminal activity is implicated, it may get referred to the NIH DPI or even to OIG. Once with NIH DPI, non-criminal allegations stay under their purview, but criminal investigations fall under our purview here at OIG. It's processed through the OIG hotline and, if necessary, handed off to one of our regional or headquarters investigative offices. And if it's a whistleblower retaliation, it goes to the Office of Investigation, Special Investigations Branch. Disclosures of wrongdoing may not always receive an investigation. However, there are other parts of the OIG that may still need to review it, like our Office of Audit Services, where they audit protected disclosures. Okay, hopefully you're starting to feel comfortable with the process, but there's still a part that you might be concerned about, and rightly so. Let's talk about what to do if you experience retaliation. So, if you happen to make a protected disclosure to the OIG or any of the other protected sources, any of the people that we discussed earlier, you have the right to file a retaliation complaint with the OIG. Just use the same process you did for filing your disclosure, found at the web address here, or calling 1-800-HHS-TIPS. But it can be easier said than done.
Despite the fears that you may have, it is important to understand the process. Knowing what that is might alleviate some of those fears. Once you file, your retaliation complaint is reviewed by our Office of Investigations to determine if it meets the criteria for investigation. During this criteria review, that's when you may be contacted by an investigator to gather information about your complaint. Next, if your retaliation complaint is accepted, that's when an investigation ensues. If that happens, you will receive a report of investigation that details the findings of your case. Others receiving the report may include any person acting on behalf of the complainants, the contractor or employer alleged to have committed the violation, the head of the agency, which is the HHS secretary or designee, and the head of contracting activity if your employer is a federal contractor. An HHS official will make a decision as to what actions will be taken and what remedies are available as a result of the OIG's findings.
I recall a whistleblower retaliation case where someone came to us and experienced, mistreatment, discrimination, and harassment because they decided to speak up to their senior staff about activities they found to be inappropriate. It was quite an extensive process to guide this individual in the right direction, but we held their hand the entire way through. The great outcome was this: they got their position back, they got their status back, and ultimately they received their peace of mind for knowing that they did the right thing, even though it came with a little bit of a struggle. So that really makes me feel accomplished and grateful that we were able to help them sustain their career in the midst of all the turbulence.
Now, despite all the positives, it is important for you to know that not every retaliation complaint is accepted for investigation. You'll be notified by the Office of Investigations if that's the case. But here are a few examples of what retaliation may look like in real life.
There was an employee working on an NIH-funded project who questioned the principal investigator on payments made to them as consultants without any contract in place. The next month, the employee was told their position was being eliminated, yet 2 additional staff members were just hired. There was also an employee of an NIH contractor who reported to management that they were billing for items not used on several projects. The next week, the employee was transferred to the West Side office, which meant they now had a 50-mile work commute. The employee believes this was an attempt to make them resign. I also recall a contractor employee who came forward and reported suspected fraud related to knowing misrepresentation and excess billing of labor hours to the government. They were subsequently removed by their employer from a coveted high-profile project without just cause.
Now, these are serious stories, so you might be wondering about whether or not you can remain anonymous when reporting wrongdoing. Let's find out. Straight answer, yes. Concerns regarding suspected wrongdoing related to NIH contracts or grants can be made anonymously, but it's important to provide as many details as possible, especially specific information that ties the allegation to an NIH grant or contract when making an anonymous complaint. Anything you can provide helps.
That's true, but we also need to add that while the initial disclosure can be made anonymously and can be made to any protected source, only the HHS-OIG has the authority to investigate allegations of whistleblower retaliation related to NIH grants or contracts. This means that the HHS-OIG will need the name of the impacted person to investigate allegations of retaliation for making a protected disclosure.
True and important. And since there's a lot to consider when it comes to additional information regarding reporting disclosures of wrongdoing or retaliation, we encourage you to visit the HHS-OIG website. Now, let's review what happens when our team receives an allegation. First, if a contractor's or grant recipient's employee reports a retaliation allegation to an NIH employee, the NIH employee must instruct the complainant to contact the HHS-OIG directly. They should do this through the OIG hotline. That's important to note because NIH staff do not assess, respond to, or investigate these allegations. This is because whistleblower retaliation falls within the exclusive purview of the HHS-OIG. Let's talk to Elizabeth to find out a little more about what that means.
First, the HHS-OIG follows up with the appropriate NIH staff if necessary. But it's important to note that the NIH employee cannot divulge any information about their conversation with the complainant or any investigation, not even to their supervisor, express any opinions, request supporting documentation, or provide advice or guidance other than instructing them to contact the HHS-OIG.
When we receive an allegation of fraud, waste, or abuse, we'll always coordinate with our colleagues in the NIH Division of Program Integrity. We'll get as much information as we can from the whistleblower, we'll pass it forward, and we work very collaboratively with them and also with the funding institutes to safeguard the funds during the period of an investigation. Once an investigation gets serious, we'll make sure that all the funds are protected. I know our colleagues in the Division of Program Integrity coordinate with the OIG to make sure that the whistleblower is protected. And we work very collaboratively all through this process to make sure that both the whistleblower is protected and all their allegations are fully reviewed and enforced to the maximum extent of the law.
So there's a lot that takes place during the process. But just remember, we're here to help. So we've covered a lot of ground up to this point, but there may be a few lingering questions that you may have. So we're going to have a little bit of a lightning round as my colleagues address a few of these questions.
For grant recipient employers, the employer is required to inform employees of their whistleblower rights and protections in writing.
Or if you're a contractor, then you also need to inform all subcontracts over the simplified acquisition threshold of these protections as well.
The complainant has the right to go to court if the head of the agency denies relief or has not issued an order within 210 days after the submission of the complaint or within 30 days after the expiration of the agreed-upon extension of the investigation period provided by the complainant. If the situation ever gets to that point, it's good to know that you, as a contractor or grantee employee, have the right to go to court. A contractor or subcontractor employee who believes that he or she has experienced retaliation, been discharged, demoted, or otherwise discriminated against may submit a complaint with the HHS Office of Inspector General.
Thanks, Elizabeth, for that great information. I'll handle the rest from here. Procedures for submitting fraud, waste, abuse, and whistleblower complaints are generally accessible on the HHS Office of Inspector General hotline and/or whistleblower internet sites. You may submit your complaint online at the HHS-OIG website, or you may also forward your tip via one of the channels listed here. Phone number is 1-800-HHS-TIPS or 1-800-447-8477. TTY is 1-800-377-4950. Or you can mail in a complaint to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Inspector General, Attention OIG Hotline Operations, P.O. Box 23489, Washington, D.C. 20026. You can even contact us by fax at 1-800-223-8164. That is, if you even know where to find a fax machine. Bottom line, there are a ton of ways for you to get in contact with us. Whew, that was a lot. Hopefully you found this video helpful and a practical resource. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at whistleblower.coordinator@oig.hhs.gov or visit our website at www.oig.hhs.gov. We're always here to help.